All right, everybody. So as we all know, Peter Thiel recently entered the world of literary analysis and wrote at great length about Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen. For some reason, not that many people are talking about it, though. I don't know, maybe there's a lot going on with society.
He was described as one of the smartest tax people in the world.
Interesting.
And I probably was my moral weakness that I.
Well, how could you have known back then? He had never been arrested.
No, this was 2014. It was post-arrest.
The Epstein files. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released more details, more names today, saying Elon Musk, that's a new one, Steve Bannon, Peter Thiel.
Mr. Thiel, do you have any comments about Palantir's surveillance of the American people, sir? Or any of your connections to Jeffrey Epstein?
This thing has been stuck in my head ever since I read it like a month ago. I'm a pretty big fan of Watchmen, and Peter Thiel, as we all know, is one of the foremost intellectuals of our time.
Despite the slight handicap of being a billionaire, there's a good case that he's the most influential right-wing intellectual of the last 20 years.
His analysis is not just bafflingly wrong about the basics of Watchmen, like super basic plot stuff and character arcs that a lot of teenage boys figured out when they were 14 years old. It's also full of his bizarre theology, his Antichrist stuff, which, I don't know if you know this, he's been talking about around the country to special rich people in closed-door sessions.
You should be way more worried about the Antichrist, because no one's worried about it. And of course,
And so in order for me to be able to move on with the channel and do stuff that I actually was planning on doing, I need to go through this basically sentence by sentence to talk about why it's stupid. Thiel's Watchmen analysis comes in the form of a very, 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 very long essay he co-wrote called Voyages to the End of the World. It was published in the November 2025 issue of First Things magazine, which describes itself as America's most influential journal of religion and public life. So he talks about a lot of things, not just Watchmen. He also talks about Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and Eiichiro Oda's One Piece. The manga and the anime, yes, really. I don't really know anything about the other titles he's talking about, including One Piece, but I did enjoy amazing out-of-context images like this, with captions that say things like Christ-like Luffy and Big Mom, the Whore of Babylon. So each of these sections is pretty self-contained. We're going to be focusing on the Watchmen thing, but there's a through line about the Antichrist, so we do need a little bit of context, sadly. If I understood this essay, which I did not, I think what Peter Thiel is trying to say is like,
hey, we all agree that the Antichrist is a concept that is real and exists and is going to happen. Let's see what we can learn about how the Antichrist might rise to power in real life by examining these works of fiction.
I think that's what he's doing. I hate Peter Thiel for a lot of reasons. And a new one is that I have to explain his weird, convoluted beliefs in a way that is more succinct than he is.
People are far more worried about Armageddon than they are worried about the one world state. And I would at least like us to worry about them equally, to worry both about Scylla and Charybdis.
okay, so
Maybe it's more clear now that he can write everything down. Maybe now it'll make sense that it's all written out in an essay. Oh, and also he co-wrote this with a guy named Sam Wolf. So just know that everything I'm saying could apply to Sam, but no one's going to click on the Sam Wolf video about Watchmen. Who is this guy? Sam Wolf is a young, up-and-coming writer/researcher at Thiel Capital. Cool, fine. That's also not what this video is about. Like, this is how it starts. Francis Bacon dreamed of abolishing disease, natural disasters, and chance itself. He also dreamed of abolishing God. Bacon hid this latter dream in New Atlantis, 1626, a posthumous novella that may be read as a map for modernity, a book of prophecies, or a grimoire. New Atlantis began as a secret literary debate, one later taken up by Jonathan Swift, Alan Moore, and Eiichiro Oda. Across 4 centuries, these writers wondered, will science summon or suppress the Antichrist? That's how it starts. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't actually care about any of that. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to grant Peter Thiel all of his premises. Let's say, for the sake of just getting to the part where I get to talk about Watchmen for fun, like 100% for sure, Peter Thiel is totally right about everything he believes about the Bible and the Antichrist and that there really was a secret literary debate that happened across 4 centuries. Let's say that that totally happened, even though when you read the article itself, it's pretty clear that what he means by secret literary debate is an argument he's had in his own mind between the voices that reside there.
Demons of the mind.
I don't know if an author can really take up a literary debate if they didn't know it was happening. Let's also agree with this thing that he's saying, that apparently Sir Francis Bacon wanted to destroy science and wanted to destroy God, even though he was famously a Christian who cited the Bible when he wrote about science.
He believed that natural philosophers should help improve the well-being of humanity through technological advances. Bacon expressed this within a Christian framework, casting Aristotle's philosophy as a dereliction of the Christian duty of charity toward others.
Let's pretend like this is in any way a normal, sensible thing for a billionaire weapons manufacturer to be spending his time doing. Fine, he's 100% right about all that stuff. He's still like 87% wrong about Watchmen, and he's 100% out of his goddamn mind. I recorded this whole video and then remembered I never actually explained what Watchmen is to those who are not familiar. The original 12-issue run of Watchmen, now collected as a graphic novel, is considered one of the great works of comics literature. The plot of it is essentially the plot of The Incredibles, but first. For a while, superheroes were legal, and then something happened and they were made to be illegal. And now some villainous figure is murdering costumed heroes. But it's not so much the story of Watchmen as it is the storytelling. The way it plays with the comics medium, having stories within stories, using the visual symmetry of the comics panels. I'll explain the necessary details as we go along, but here's a professional to explain some of the characters.
And there's another hero called Night Owl, and he's an awful lot like Batman, only an owl!
Okay, cool. So that hopefully cleared up everything about Watchmen. So let's now get into it. I'm going to jump to the Watchmen section. Just imagine that you heard him talking about Gulliver's Travels or something before this. And so he starts by saying, 2 decades later, to awaken a world sleepwalking into Armageddon, Alan Moore wrote the superhero comic Watchmen, 1986 to 1987, a late modern illustration of the Antichrist. Now, I found this a little confusing because Peter Thiel recently claimed, or revealed, depending on how you look at it, that the Pope is the Antichrist. Like that one, like the main Pope.
New, J.D. Vance's top donor suggests Pope Leo is the Antichrist. That's, of course, Peter Thiel. In a leaked lecture, Peter Thiel says he's urged Vance to ignore the Pope on moral questions and simply pray for him.
So is he saying that when Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore were doing Watchmen in 1986, that is cosmically an illustration of the woke Marxist Pope?
Woke Marxist Pope. I'm gonna keep on laughing as the woke Marxist Pope.
Again, we'll just pretend that does make sense. But I still have a nitpick with the first sentence anyway, but it is a nitpick, so we're going to have to go in the corner.
Why is it necessary to be so picky, to be so fussy?
This introduction, you might have noticed, is subtly worded to lend to the feeling that Alan Moore wrote Watchmen because he personally believed in Armageddon and the Antichrist. I know it doesn't technically say that, but Thiel is deceptive generally, and throughout this piece, he blurs the line between analogy and theology. Be for real, Peter Thiel, did Alan Moore really write Watchmen to awaken a world that was sleepwalking into Armageddon? Like, that was his artistic intent for sure. I don't think that you can just make that bold declarative claim, bold words those. Or is that some shit that you're making up? Or some shit that Sam is making up? Or some shit that you just typed into ChatGPT and let that shit it out onto your shitty essay? Moore's superheroes are watchmen in 2 senses. They watch over the world and they are the men of our final hour. A grievous vision in the book of Isaiah, from which Moore took his title, combines these 2 meanings. For thus the Lord said unto me, go set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth. Immediately, Peter Thiel is substantially wrong about so many things about Watchmen. Like, he says that Moore got his title from the book of Isaiah, and no, like, famously from a Latin phrase that I can't pronounce. It means, who watches the watchman?
The title Watchmen, like almost every aspect of the book, functions on a lot of different levels, but where did the name actually come from?
The origin of that is, I think it was a Roman writer called Juvenal, who said, I think it was when the Roman army was going to be away from Rome, the Roman soldiers said, well, what about our wives? And they said, oh, well, we'll get watchmen to watch them. And the question was, well, okay, but who watches the Watchmen?
And Peter Thiel technically does know this because he references it later in the piece. But now, just for now, he's saying that Alan Moore for sure chose the title Watchmen specifically because he got it from the Bible, and there just isn't really any evidence for that. So let's say you're Peter Thiel and you want to do the bare minimum amount of research for your bullshit essay. Or let's say you're me and you want to do the bare amount of research necessary for your video essay where you make fun of Peter Thiel's essay. What I would do, because I did, is I would go to the Watchmen/DC Comics fan wiki and see what they have to say, because it's like the first Google results anyway. And the Watchmen fan wiki says Juvenal was credited with exposing the vice of Roman society through his satires, and in a similar fashion, Watchmen examines the trope of the costumed adventurer or superhero by examining the human flaws of its hero characters in lieu of the traditional comic book focus on its characters' strengths. So I submit to you, viewer, that Peter Thiel did not even do the bare minimum, because I did. I can't prove this, but I really think he's just going off of memory. Like, he didn't reread it for this at all, assumed he knew all of it, and nobody checked it, not even Sam. Because a comic book fan wiki has more genuine literary analysis and insight than Peter Thiel, which, Ross, he's like a philosopher or something?
The most influential right-wing intellectual of the last 20 years.
So he's a big deal, is what Ross is saying. A big Thiel, god damn it. I would also add to that wiki summation that Watchmen is a story about the vices of American society. That epistolary approach to Watchmen, how there's scraps of newspaper, Hollis Mason's memoir, the Black Freighter series, these things emphasize the way our information ecosystem was fracturing even in the 1980s. The news media, television cameras, all that stuff is really important to Watchmen. And in the face of existential problems, our main characters retreat into sex, drugs, religion, delusion, anything to avoid reality. Watchmen posits if the Superman did exist and he was American, the American government would turn him into a weapon and a propaganda tool. I don't actually know if those things count as vices of American society. I just wanted it to sound smart like that fan wiki did. And I guess the point of all that was, I don't know why Peter Thiel thinks that Watchmen is from the fucking Bible. That's not even the only Bible verse that mentions Watchmen. It is. Can I tell you what? Oh my God, I never get to do this. This is what he's thinking of. Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. By definitely only Harper Lee, and nobody helped out or did anything when she had dementia. In a nuclear age, Moore's superheroes are faintly ridiculous, except for one, they have no superpowers, but these high-agency individuals are dangerous too. Who watches the Watchmen? Chant public protesters, quoting Juvenal. Right, so like he does know about it, but just still insists, even though it's like famously that, it's like this is a famous book. This is a famous book, Peter Thiel. There's a lot of well-known things about it. He's just, okay, that doesn't matter. Let's pretend he's right. He's wrong about just the plot and things that happen. At no point do people in Watchmen chant who watches the Watchmen. That does not happen. It is shown in graffiti. It's shown spray painted on some walls. I thought he might be talking about the movie, but I was pretty sure that actually wasn't in the movie either. And so I checked, and no, yeah, the scene where there is chanting in public protest, no, nobody's chanting that. You can't just say shit that didn't happen in the book, you idiot. That's another nitpick. The thing that really annoys me, it's not like wrong, but like morally it is. He says kind of glibly like, cool, in a nuclear age, the superheroes are rather quaint and ridiculous, aren't they? And like, yeah, that's the whole fucking point of Watchmen, you dipshit. Moore's masked vigilantes are blatantly ridiculous in all ages because superheroes are a ridiculous concept, and that's the whole thing that they're trying to explore in Watchmen. In fact, they are not superheroes and do not refer to themselves as superheroes. They're vigilantes, costumed adventurers. And the core of this story that even the Zack Snyder film totally understands is, hey, you know what? The kind of person who would put on a mask and beat the shit out of people at night is probably not super mentally stable. That's actually kind of something we think of bad guys doing. Like really bad, like fascists even. Like, remember the Comedian as a character? The whole concept of the Comedian? Probably you do, but Peter Thiel does not bring up the Comedian at all. I think that should be illegal in an analysis of Watchmen and like the politics and religion of it to just not even in passing bring up the Comedian. He should go to opinion jail and also real jail. He's in the Epstein files.
People get unjustly accused. A culture of complaint leads to a culture of blame.
The question isn't about the sex with the underage women. The question is really about, why was he so protected? probably the sex stuff is overdone and everything else is underdone. It's like a limited hangout. We get to talk about the crazy underage sex and not about all the other questions.
Sam, we're just trying to help. This is the problem with trying to view Watchmen through a religious lens. It's not a religious text, even though it has plenty to say about religion and religiously minded people. It's also the problem with trying to superimpose your politics on a text while refusing to acknowledge the politics of the text. Watchmen's narrator is Rorschach, a hard-boiled superhero somewhere between Bruce Wayne and Ayn Rand. By day, Rorschach is an apocalyptic street crier, half convinced the world deserves its fate. I really hate this. What do you mean half convinced? Rorschach carries around, Walter Kovacs is his fucking name, he carries around a sign that says the end is nigh. He believes that. He doesn't half believe that the world deserves its fate. He does believe it fully. He is a true believer in that concept of good and evil and black and white justice. He just doesn't think that Adrian Veidt or Ozymandias is fate. Like, he doesn't believe that Adrian Veidt's plan is God's will. He doesn't believe that that's the divine Armageddon that the Bible talks about, because, like, Rorschach knows Ozymandias.
Everyone's gonna know what you've done.
Will they? By exposing me, you would sacrifice the peace so many died for today.
Like, he knows that guy, and he knows that he's not an instrument of God. That's okay. That wasn't even in my script. The Bruce Wayne thing, like, I understand that they are both crime fighters with a gravelly voice. I think that Bruce Wayne would view Rorschach as a villain, and Rorschach would view Bruce Wayne as a villain based on their worldview. And actually, maybe that does happen in Doomsday Clock, but I never read that. And I also don't know that much about Ayn Rand, but from what I do understand, I think that her philosophy applies much more to Adrian Veidt / Ozymandias than it does to Rorschach. Rand was an objectivist, and according to Wikipedia, which is the extent I care to research Ayn Rand, Rand described objectivism as the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. That describes Ozymandias. I mean, Watchmen is, like, a lot of it is open to interpretation. Like, those tests that you can't, like, depending on who looks at it, it's subjectively a little different, like an ink blot test. But Rorschach beneath the mask is not unknowable or mysterious. He is, aside from the mask and dedication of his mission, a tragically common sort of man. Born into a life of abuse and neglect, he is driven to madness due to the violent absurdity of life. His journal entries are way more interesting than anything Ayn Rand ever wrote. That's probably because they were based on, like, the ramblings of serial killers and madmen.
Now the whole world stands on the brink, staring down into bloody hell. All those liberals and intellectuals and smooth talkers. And all of a sudden nobody can think of anything to say.
Rorschach's favorite news source is the New Frontiersman, and it's a right-wing reactionary conspiracy rag. His opening monologue is about the evils of liberals and whores. It's also famously a monologue about not helping people in need.
The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up about their waist, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us!" And I'll look down and whisper, "No."
Maybe that's the objectivist thing he's talking about, but I think for Rorschach it comes from this biblical place that during Armageddon, it's amazing. Like, you totally can apply a biblical lens to Watchmen. And, like, at a couple points, Peter Thiel points out things that are valid. It's just, like, the way he does it is so weird. I think the way that Rorschach is staring up, crying and begging, "Save us," and he looks down and answers no. That's the Old Testament God. They all have to look at all of the Christians being saved.
Look, it's our friend we used to pick on for being Christian.
Oh, can you take us to heaven now, please?
Ooh, I cannot.
This is the ramblings of a madman filled with right-wing conspiratorial and scriptural buzzwords. I was actually reading something recently that kind of struck me as a Rorschach-like writing, like something that Rorschach might have written, and it was this fucking post by Peter Thiel. The point is that Watchmen is a rich text, but it is not a subtle text. Thiel doesn't even mention the comedian, like I said, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that Watchmen invites comparison between our masked vigilante protagonist and gangs, Gestapo, fascists, or the KKK, which of course the HBO show leans into, and we all agree the HBO show fucking rocks. It's awesome. So how is Peter Thiel missing like the most obvious interpretations of Watchmen and things that pretty much everyone knows about it? Well, it's because the subtext and just plain text of Watchmen contradicts Peter Thiel's personal politics.
Because when you start looking for racism everywhere and you start finding racism everywhere, it's only a very small step to finding racists everywhere. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if those racists are really out there, but I'm going to suggest to you that they really aren't. The problems of racism, sexism, other forms of oppression have been vastly exaggerated, and as a result, people get unjustly accused. A culture of complaint leads to a culture of blame, and that is ultimately the real problem with it.
You see, he is a man of near limitless resources who is dedicating his life to creating surveillance equipment and funding, masked, antisocial, crazy people who want to do violence to who they perceive as the degeneracy of society. ICE.
But it's summer and we're running out of ice.
It's kind of like how Lady True funds the 7th Cavalry, but we're not talking about the HBO series. Much like Adrian Veidt, Peter Thiel sees himself as a mythic figure, as somebody of biblical importance, and he has all of this money, and he's gay.
Homosexual.
But Thiel is very aware of the way he is viewed by everyone who isn't on his payroll. In interviews and this essay, he laments that Hollywood presents villains that are evil scientists with world-ending technology.
It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world.
Oh, what a horrible stereotype. That'll make us suspicious of powerful figures. He builds this line of reasoning in his Watchmen analysis. First, he makes sure the reader understands that Veidt is woke, and thus one of the bad kinds of billionaires. As a young man, Ozymandias smoked Tibetan hashish. Hashish?
Hashish.
Ozymandias smoked Tibetan hashish and dreamed of surpassing Alexander the Great by uniting the world. He is a self-proclaimed pacifist and vegetarian, in some ways more Christian than Christ, and the sort of figure who might, quote, deceive the very elect. That's a thing from the Bible. If you don't know about the Antichrist is like a false savior that seems to usher in an age of peace and security, but really, oops, he's the bad guy going to make Armageddon happen, but also that doesn't really matter because God's going to save the good people. So why is he even that fucking bothered about it? This isn't about the Bible. This is about Watchmen, exclusively the whole time, front to back. But first, an advertisement. This program is brought to you by viewers like you. That's the end of the advertisement. Moving on. The way he describes Veidt is interesting, though. It's like he's kind of taking pains to show that, well, I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not a self-proclaimed pacifist. I sell weapons of war to evil fucking genocide monsters. And I do eat meat, according to a quick search I did on one of the chatbots Peter Thiel is using to replace us. And not even Ross Douthat thinks Peter Thiel is more Christian than Christ.
I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done.
Obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
I'm not a Christian, and it still seems deeply inappropriate to me that Peter Thiel is able to even utter the name Jesus Christ without bursting into flames.
I think Christ is a very complex, very ambiguous figure in many ways. It's always which makes, I think, the interpretation quite difficult.
I don't like. It feels offensive that this guy is talking about Jesus. He's like the opposite of Jesus Christ. He's like the anti. There is good and evil, says Rorschach, and evil must be punished. Even in the face of Armageddon, I shall not compromise in this. The otherwise meditative Dr. Manhattan disagrees and kills Rorschach. As though to trigger Christian readers, Manhattan then walks on water. That must have been super fucking hard for him. Also, quit nitpick, but this is just, like, shitty analysis. Thiel acts like it's out of character for an otherwise meditative Dr. Manhattan to kill Rorschach. But no, this is not out of character character for Dr. Manhattan to do. He is entirely unemotional about killing Rorschach, just as he was when he killed countless Vietnamese soldiers. There are only 2 times in Watchmen when we really see Dr. Manhattan lose his otherwise meditative demeanor. When he's on live TV and starts getting all the questions about cancer, and when Veidt tries to kill him, and he comes back all big, and it's awesome. The concluding arguments of this disaster underscore how thoughtless and self-serving Thiel's entire essay is. Moore's great achievement is his updating of Bacon's pro-science antichrist for late modernity. We'll pretend that is a thing that we all understand what that means. Our nuclear world has produced endless Hollywood sci-fi dystopias and no longer believes that Baconian science can bring about peace and security. No, I can't do the bit. I can't, because what the fuck is he talking about? Like, he uses these big generalistic terms like, the world no longer believes in this. We used to believe this, but we have moved away. Who is he talking about? Nobody. It doesn't matter what he's talking about. It matters who he's talking to. This piece was not written for snarky lefty atheists like me. It was written for insipid, hoity-toity,
erudite Christian nationalists
who read fucking First Things magazine. Isn't First Things the place where you, like, take, like, a ring box to get it engraved for your grandma? You know how we engrave ring boxes?
Things remembered.
What does it even mean to say our nuclear world produces Hollywood sci-fi dystopia? Like, is he talking about the world of Watchmen or our world right now? Because the Hollywood sci-fi movies that Watchmen references are pretty specific, and they are specifically not dystopian sci-fi movies. Dystopian sci-fi is a genre, it's a thing, and like The Creature from the Black Lagoon is not dystopian sci-fi. Watchmen has a lot of little references to these monster movies, creature features, alien invasion stories. The Minutemen, like within the world of the story, started in a pre-nuclear society. We'll get there in a little bit, but this is part of that nothing ever ends thing. Even in a pre-nuclear world, there was still a sense of Armageddon. Like, one of the early books that's referenced in Watchmen is this book called The Bible. So I just don't really know what Peter Thiel is trying to get across here. It just kind of seems like Peter Thiel doesn't like modern Hollywood sci-fi dystopian movies, but that's not anything that's in Watchmen. In some early pre-nuclear films, there was still some suspicions about science and scientists. Fine, everything's fine, and we'll just say that that's fine, what he just said. Let's say he's totally correct about Sir Francis Bacon creating a pro-science antichrist. Sure, he did a pro-science antichrist. He did a nationalism. He did an imperialism. Okay, well, you still can't just assert that an author is updating a thing because the author has no idea what you're talking about because you just fucking invented it for the purposes of this stupid essay. Ozymandias knows that the way to secure power is to scare us about the future. Moore might resist the comparison, but he agrees with Carl Schmitt, who obsessed over the Pauline epistles and doubted that humanity could unite behind a political project because it has no enemy, at least not on this planet. Long sigh. That's what my script says. It says long sigh. Now, tellingly, Thiel does seem to know that the way to secure power is to scare us about the future. For example, by using all of his waking energy talking about the Antichrist through the lens of the writings of Nazi theoretician Carl Schmitt.
The Antichrist takes over by talking about Armageddon.
The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. Every microaggression has the potential to escalate to Armageddon. I think we should be at least as scared of the Antichrist as of Armageddon. There's an Armageddon.
How bad is the prospect of Armageddon?
It's quite bad.
How do you know?
Autocrats tend to kill everyone, even their own
Schmitt makes
supporters.
this point very well in his work. It's the friend-enemy distinction, right?
Carl
liberals,
Schmitt, the Nazi theoretician.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care.
Are you a fan of the Nazis?
I don't care. I frankly don't care being called a Nazi at all.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, you just know Connor was with the 7th Cavalry. But this, the Connor Jubilee shit, is the kind of zeitgeist that Thiel is tapped into. Lest we forget he funds Rumble, which funds Nick Fuentes. Sophisticated internet Nazi discourse is what Thiel is all about. When Peter Thiel says Carl Schmitt obsessed over the Pauline epistles and the Peter Thiel is the one who's obsessed with all this stuff. He's obsessing over it now in this fucking essay. So this piece kind of is the ramblings of a madman. Like, he's saying Adrian Veidt is the Antichrist, or a kind of Antichrist, which is bad. But also, he is right about some things. On one hand, he seems to concede that this is fiction. Like, he kind of seems to understand that this is fiction. It's literature. And yet, at the same time, this is not literary analysis because he doesn't believe that the Bible is literature. He believes that that is real and that somehow cosmically we can glean insights for what the Lord Jesus Christ is going to do in the very near future when Armageddon comes if we simply understand a secret conversation that's been happening in literature all these years. What? Are you okay? I'm starting to think that the pedophile billionaire genocide monster isn't actually okay.
Baconian science, it ended at Los Alamos, and then it was, okay, it ended there, and we didn't want to have any more. And, when Charles Manson took LSD in, the late 60s and started murdering people, what he saw on LSD, what he learned was that you could be like Dostoevsky, an anti-hero in Dostoevsky, and everything was permitted. And of course, not everyone became Charles Manson, but in
Charles
my
Manson, but
in my
crucially,
telling of the history, everyone became as deranged as Charles Manson.
But Charles Manson
over.
did not become the Antichrist.
Another Antichrist figure he likes to talk about is Greta Thunberg.
I don't like Greta.
To the point where he just calls her Greta, and he'll be in a conversation where Greta Thunberg has not been brought up at all. And he'll just say, that's kind of like the Greta principle. And someone will have to stop and say, you're talking about Greta Thunberg?
And Greta is more representative, or, everything about the Hollywood atheist liberals. Or do you want to worry about Greta, who wants to, make everyone drive a bicycle so the world doesn't get destroyed? The Greta future, maybe it can work,
This
but
is
we're
the
not
Greta
yet there.
Thunberg. Just to be clear, that's a reference to Greta Thunberg.
This guy's like one of the villains of the Teen Titans or something. He's just like Dick Grayson. Once I get him. This is a fucking billionaire weapons manufacturer who lives in an ivory tower and tours around talking to other secret rich pedophile guys, giving secret talks. And his number one fear is a young woman who just kind of challenges his authority, and that drives him insane.
In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
The 22-year-old activist Greta Thunberg is every bit as threatening as the Antichrist from the Bible, which he really believes. That's the kind of guy he actually is. The kind of guy he wants to be is a super genius literary analyst who can pick and choose little scriptural references. And my one threat, my one weakness is Greta. Does that sound like a healthy adult to you, dear viewer?
I don't like Greta.
Crazy guy who should go to the fucking hospital and get his head checked. Jesus Christ might be hiding esoteric clues about the fate of the world in works of fiction about superheroes who fuck. You know who's also Jesus? Luffy. And I went off on a little bit of a rant there. There's like a couple more paragraphs to this thing. I'll go through this more quickly. This, I think, is an intentional biblical reference. He says, to take over the world, Veidt stages a fake alien invasion. On a paradisal island like Ben Salem, let's ignore that, he builds a giant telekinetic alien and drops it onto a concert by a band named Pale Horse, Revelation 6:8, killing millions in New York City. I think that is correct, that the Pale Horse band is a reference to the book of Revelation. But then he says something that I don't think really holds up. He says, after Veidt's quote-unquote victory, Earth is peaceful and safe. Veidt helps New York to rebuild and emblazons the Veidt Enterprises logo across the city. See Revelation 13:17. And so I did see that verse, and it's the one about the mark of the beast. That's kind of interesting, but when I was rereading Watchmen for this, I realized that the Veidt Enterprises logo is actually across the entire city the whole time. Thiel is making it sound like this is something that happens only after he, quote, saves the world, which isn't true. Watchmen triumphs as literature and fails as philosophy or theology. Moore can only ask, not answer, Juvenal's question, who watches the Watchmen, which he knows about now. For in Moore's godless world, the question begets an infinite regress. First of all, Watchmen cannot fail as philosophy or theology. If it was never trying to be those things in the first place, asshole. He can only ask, not answer, who watches the Watchmen, because that is inherently a question that one can only ask and not answer. The point is that it doesn't really have a satisfying answer. Peter Thiel wants the answer to be, who watches the Watchmen? Well, our Lord Jesus Christ, of course. I would say, who watches Jesus? And he would be like, well, no one. Oh, and by the way, the best way to know what God thinks, because he's invisible, is you just got to trust me and what I say the Bible says. And a lot of what the Bible says lines up with Carl Schmitt. Watchmen is not a godless world. I mean, we don't get a conclusive answer on whether or not in this universe there really exists Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
Watchmen has a god in it, Dr. Manhattan, and he's an ambivalent god. He seemingly has about as much influence in the life of everyday people as the fictional god that people really believe in. Oh, like the very obvious point of fucking Watchmen. Yeah. Who watches the sponsors of the Keene Act? Who watches Nixon? Before Watchmen concludes, it seems that Veidt, the great man to end all great men, has solved the problem. It never seems like that. It seems like he thinks he solved the problem. Okay. But in Watchmen's final panels, Rorschach's diary exposing Veidt's plot sits in the submissions pile of a newspaper. No, not a newspaper. The New Frontiersman, which in the text of Watchmen is demonstrated and implied to be a right-wing conspiracy racket. This is the dramatic irony at the end of Watchmen. Rorschach, for all the things he's wrong about, uncovers the truth, but gives the truth to a source that will be easily dismissed by the broader public. Dr. Manhattan tells Veidt that nothing ever ends, suggesting that Moore's Ozymandias will share the fate of Shelley's Ozymandias, he's talking about the poem, and of the biblical Antichrist. But in the Bible, God ends the suffering. For Moore and Shelley, the only salvation is the impermanence of things. Though he loves antiquity, Veidt is an early modern like Bacon. What? Veidt is an early modern. Well, that's where you put sick in brackets. Veidt is an early modern, mistake, like Bacon, who hoped to conquer chance and establish a new Earth once and for all. The late modern Moore has given up on this project. He rejects Christ and, ambivalent about the Antichrist, resigns himself to fatalism. This is some of the worst writing I've ever read in my goddamn life, and I have read other articles Peter Thiel has allegedly written without the help of ChatGPT. No, Manhattan's warning that nothing ever ends is not a suggestion that Veidt will be destroyed, like the biblical Antichrist. Dr. Manhattan is saying that human problems, the trials intrinsic to human nature, never end, that you can never fully end human suffering because suffering just is. Veidt is able to achieve temporary world peace based on a lie, arguably, but it obviously doesn't end all wars everywhere. It just creates a new post-nuclear status quo, one that will one day allow for new kinds of wars to happen. One of the problems with Adrian Veidt is that his plan is only a good plan if you agree with the broad consensus that world peace would better achieve uniting all of humans against a common enemy. And I just think that the history of humankind has taught us that that is not a thing that all humans want to do. We don't unite against a common enemy, even when it's just a fucking virus. No, I'm gonna cough in your face confrontationally at a CVS and cause a scene. What am I even talking about? I strayed from my script. This is all pretty obvious to normal people, but Thiel seems to think that the role of fiction is to validate the sovereignty of Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
But that, what Peter Thiel wants, would create bad fiction that isn't any fun to read. To continue being the most basic-ass millennial white dude on the internet, there's a Rick and Morty episode that kind of explores this concept. So there's this very meta episode where to ruin it, Rick at the very end does this.
There's no way out! You're right, Morty. Sometimes it does seem like there's no way out, like it's hopeless. But remember, there's always someone there for us. Who? My best friend and personal savior, Jesus Christ.
What? It's a silly joke, but apparently it also needs to be said because Peter Thiel doesn't seem to understand that if literature worked the way he wants it to, it wouldn't exist in the first place.
Are you with me? Oh, trust me, Morty. I've done plenty of effed up stuff in my life, but it's never too late to accept Christ.
Like, if Watchmen was the story he wanted it to be, if it succeeded at philosophy and theology as he sees it, well, then it wouldn't be Watchmen, and he wouldn't be talking about it.
Stop! You guys would never do this! Fill me with your spirit. Make me a shining city on a hill for you. Make me born again.
Sorry, that was not quick at all. I think I said I was going to go quickly through the last two paragraphs. Last one. One final detail in Watchmen bears mentioning. In Moore's alternate history, superheroes threaten public order. As the apocalypse approaches, readers abandon superhero comics for pirate comics, particularly a series entitled Tales of the Black Freighter. Like superheroes, pirates are daring and individualistic. Unlike superheroes, they use their powers for evil. Or, more accurately, they use their powers to defy the ruling authorities. One-man superhero, Moore says, is another government's pirate. That's his little mic drop moment at the end of the Watchmen section. He's a simpleton. Peter Thiel sucks at reading and writing about the things he's read. And fucking Sam Wolf, not doing so great either. Several college degrees came together, ostensibly read Watchmen more than one time, and came away with the understanding that, quote, unlike superheroes, pirates use their powers for evil. Dude, the main character in Tales of the Black Freighter isn't even a pirate. He's just a normal shipwrecked ship captain whose ship, I think, was destroyed by the Black Freighter. He's a shipwrecked sea captain who is desperately trying to survive this encounter with the Black Freighter so that he can get home and warn his people about the impending doom of the pirates. This is the point of the story. The sea captain begins with the noblest of intentions, but isolation and obsession drives him to become the very monster he sought to warn about. The captain tells himself he cares only about the salvation of others. He can conceive of no greater destruction than an attack by the Black Freighter, and surely warning others of this danger is worth any sacrifice to his own humanity. And so, we watch helplessly our young sea captain shed one inhibition after another. He becomes disfigured by his evil, a corpse of a man, and his train of thought, once clear and utilitarian, becomes twisted up in delusions. As he loses track of his reality, so do we. In his madness, he creates a raft of corpses, and when he does finally get home, or is it his home, he ends up slaughtering everyone he cares about. He no longer recognizes them, and they don't recognize him. The Black Freighter is a ghost story. It is a phantom ship. By the end of this story, we still don't know if the Black Freighter is real or if it's a phantom, but the unspeakable evils committed by the sea captain are undeniable. Peter, I know you don't read books. I was talking about you. The Black Freighter. Swap it with Palantir. You'll understand what I'm talking about. This month's program, like all programs, really is brought to you by viewers like you. Specifically, this month's brand ambassador, QC Man 2000, whose name I just said out loud to camera and we all heard it. If you want to be a brand ambassador and have me say your name like I definitely just did, consider being a patron. And also, your names will be in the credits, and sometimes I post stuff early. It's mostly just a chip in. Okay, so the last little thing for my notes that I forgot to say, it says, Watchmen slips between timelines, settings, and literary genres. So far, so good. Recurring symbols lend the story its otherwise faint linearity. Recurring symbols lend the story its otherwise faint linearity. I want Peter Thiel to use the data he's already got on me and come to my house and personally explain to me what he means by that sentence. Like, is he saying that Watchmen is like barely linear? That it's like, well, it's kind of a linear story, barely, faintly. Like, no, there's a story moving forward and there's some flashbacks. It's not that, I mean, this is not Miss Macintosh, My Darling. And that's a real nerdy reference that we save to the end of the credits.
There's a critique of my penis. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little.
Is it something you worry about?
Yeah, I don't know. My penis hasn't worked for 50 years. My vagina is in some sense pretty big.
I generally agree.